your summer has been great so far. And I hope you're in the mood for some scary stories this evening. So we are going to be doing 3 scary Reddit encounters, so of the non-paranormal type tonight. So get cozy, get comfortable, and get ready to be spooked. Now with that being said, and of course, without any further ado, let's get into tonight's stories, shall we? Alrighty, so the first story was originally posted by a Reddit user called Unprettyhabits. Their story is called "Acting Naive Might Have Saved My Life." A little backstory leading up to this meeting. I grew up in a shady area and would rarely leave home after 7 or 8 p.m, as it was actually considered dangerous to do so. Going into high school, I got a pit bull. He was a gentle giant who loved everyone and everything. He had some protection work training before he joined our family, but as he was getting older, he retired and I took him home with me. So, back to the story. I was at this time a 17-year-old female, short, blonde, but very aware of my size. But having a big, scary dog, I finally felt safe walking alone, and on that very night, I had set out to take a longer walk as my dog, let's call him Meatball, really needed to run off some energy. I took him to the woods near my home and we walked along a gravel path that was badly lit. It was around 11 p.m. and quite dark outside. As we walked, I became aware of the fact that there really wasn't anyone else around. We walked for around 10 or 15 minutes before a man turned up behind us. We continued to walk, and I noticed that he's taking the same turns as me and Meatball. I sped up, feeling my heart beat in my chest. Meatball, who normally spent his time sniffing at the end of the leash, was now very aware of the situation. He had slowed down and he had gotten so close to my leg with full focus on this man. I started turning at every turn I could and the man followed, even though we were now basically walking in circles. He started getting closer and closer to us, as I am now sure that he is following us. I remember something my father once told us. Never let someone follow you, as you are most vulnerable from behind. If you get in a situation where you can force your stalker to pass you, do so. So I stopped. I grabbed onto Meatball's leash and I leaned back in the leash, acting as I have to put my entire body weight into holding him back. Now, I'm aware that at this point in my life I looked small and weak, but as my father is an old veteran, I could fight before I could walk. my dad showed up only a few minutes later, baseball bat in hand. Now, I know that nothing really happened, but after being followed by this man at every turn I took for at least 35 minutes, I know this could have ended really badly if I had not had Meatball or my dad close by. It had been a little while, but I'm glad we could do another story with a dog in it, and a really good boy at that. Now, seriously though, this story contains really, really helpful advice. I mean, what this Redditor's dad said is absolutely sound advice, because it's true, you are most vulnerable from behind. And I think if you are being stalked and followed by a creep, then I think the last thing that they would expect is for you to turn around and to face them, right? They don't expect that. They expect their prey, if I can say it like that. They expect their prey to try and run and try and get away, and not to turn around and confront them. At least the creep in this story didn't expect it, and he was thrown off by it. Now, I'm sure that partially it was also the scary pit bull, who in reality wasn't scary and was like a really sweet dog. That might have helped, but I think that the advice that this Redditor's dad has is very helpful, I think. So, I mean, we love a good cautionary tale on here, don't we? I feel like reading all of these stories on here on the channel, and I hope you guys kind of feel the same. I feel like it is helping me in my own life. It is giving me helpful tips on what to do or what not to do when in these kinds of situations where it could potentially be dangerous, right? Alright, for the next story, seeing as it's summer and it's hiking and backpacking season, I've got a creepy encounter while backpacking for you. Now, this was posted by a Redditor who would rather me not share their username, which that is absolutely no problem for me. And their story is also literally called Creepy Encounter Backpacking. So, I, a 27-year-old female, went backpacking alone over a recent long weekend, which was 10 out of 10 beautiful. The second night, I camped at a beautiful high elevation lake, which could also be accessed by a short, approximately 1 mile trail. So there were a few other campers and several other people who were just day hiking or fishing. It was late afternoon and I was sitting around my camp reading when a guy in his mid-20s walked by carrying a fish bowl and a small cooler. Now, I didn't think much of it, but 5 or 10 minutes later he doubled back and came and said hi. I said hi and went back to reading, but then, without warning, once, but in a creepy, amused tone, like, "So you're just reading?" And then he looked behind me and noticed my tent and said, "Oh, so you're staying the night here alone, are you?" I didn't say anything in response to this in particular, but it was obvious that I was. It's hard to explain, but his vibe was just really off. I was so uncomfortable that I couldn't even really form words or tell him what I was trying to say, and that I wanted to be alone and I wanted him to leave. Now I was honestly just paralyzed. His eyes were so dead and dark and just drilling into me. I just responded with like, uhs, or yep, or something, and just pretended that I was still reading. Without warning, he pulls out and cracks a beer and lights a cigarette, and he just starts blowing the smoke at me. At this point, I'm so uncomfortable and I'm just not even responding anymore. Soon, another hiker wandered by and he strikes up a conversation with him, and I took that opportunity to grab my water filter and bladder and pretend to need to get water. So I went to the shore and I filtered some water super slowly, and I saw him walk away to go sit with the new guy, which made me relieved, except that he kept looking in my direction. I came back eventually and got inside my tent, and for about 20 minutes everything was fine. I had the rain fly pulled back and I was watching the sunset and loosely organising my things when he suddenly popped out from behind my tent and stood maybe 1 foot from my door, just looking at me. He didn't say anything, but just started laughing really creepily and like fake again. I asked, "What?" And his response was, "This is just really funny." When he said that, I just felt literally sick to my stomach and finally responded with something like, "I'm taking a nap now, so have a good night." He laughed again, but then luckily he left. Later, I saw him still wandering around the camp with just no real purpose, still looking in my direction often though. I had no service, but I wrote down his last name, or at least what was written on his cooler. I also took note on where he was from, and he said that while he was talking to that other hiker, and I had put all of this in my notes app. Now, just in case, I also slept with my pocket knife close. Now, while I was lying there, I was contemplating actually leaving camp that night, but I ended up staying and just leaving super early in the morning the next day in case he came back. Now, normally while backpacking, I think the worst thing that could happen is that I might run into a bear or sprain an ankle. And maybe this seems not that bad as you're reading it, but this is truly the most unsettling experience I've ever had in the backcountry. I'm sure I'll be back out soon, but hopefully somewhere far away from this dude. Firstly, I want to say that this woman who wrote this post is very brave for going hiking and camping on her own. I don't think I would do it because I've just heard too many this story actually reminds me, even though it's not that similar, but it reminds me of this new game that I've been playing on PS5. It's called The Quarry, and it's about a group of friends who are camp counselors in a summer camp out in the woods at Hackett's Quarry. And it's a horror game where it's one of those games where you make decisions throughout the game and that every decision affects your path. But it's a really good game, and the story takes place over the span of one night, and a lot of really horrible and messed up shit happens. And I don't know why it reminds me of that, probably because it's out camping, but I just wanted to share that with you guys. Let me know in the comments if you've already played that game and what your thoughts are on it, because I'm now on my second playthrough. Moving on to the next story, which is also the last one, sadly. Now, this story was originally posted by a Reddit user called Impressive Sentence 26, and their story is called A Scary Date. I'm a fairly recently divorced 49-year-old female who decided to try out some dating apps. I mean, go get it, girl. I'm all for it. Now, obviously, with dating apps, you have to be careful as well. A lot of creepers on there. So, I went on a few dates with mixed results. However, this one really freaked me out. I matched with a 50-year-old male. We texted, spoke on the phone briefly, and made plans for a lunch date. Sounds nice enough so far. Now, the restaurant was in a well-populated, busy area. He got there a few minutes before me and was sloppily chowing down on chips and salsa as I walked up. As soon as I sat down, he gave me a really creepy smile. His eyes widened, and he said, "Oh." It made me really uncomfortable, and that was the first red flag of the evening. I should have listened to my gut and left then. He had a drink in front of him and immediately asked if I wanted a margarita. When I told him I didn't drink, he seemed very disappointed. He rudely asks the waiter for another drink, which red flag number 2, where he was rude and disrespectful to the waitstaff. We start talking about jobs, family, hobbies, etc. And when I mention that I used to be a social worker, he gets an angry and accusatory look on his face, and he says, "Well, my daughter is in jail." Red flag number 3. I don't know how to react and say, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." His face immediately changes. He smiles and he says, "That's okay." Red flag number 4. So he continues to order 2 more drinks while being rude to the waitstaff and making a comment about how they probably don't speak English. Alright, I get it, because they're in a Mexican restaurant. That is very casually racist. Wow. This guy, I hate him already. Now, as the date is coming to an end, he tells me he wants to never see me again. I told him that I didn't feel like we clicked and I wasn't interested. He continues to insist despite my protests, and he says that he can take me out on his boat. Red flag number 5. I told him that it appears that he doesn't hear the word no too often. He gets aggravated. We pay, we leave, and we walk out. We are now on the sidewalk, and as I say goodbye, he then leans over to kiss me. Oh God, what a nightmare this is. I hold my hand up, and I tell him that I'm not interested. He angrily looks me in the eyes and says, "No, you are going to kiss me." Now, he is 5 inches taller than me and outweighs me by at least 75 pounds. I start walking away. He grabs my shoulder. Now I pull away and I say, "What the fuck? Leave me alone." And I jump in my car. Now I had parked really close to the front of the restaurant, which is why I was able to jump into my car so quickly. Now my head was spinning. I pulled out and looked in my rearview mirror and noticed that he's getting into his car. He was back behind me. The whole way home I was looking in my mirror just to make sure that he wasn't following me. Luckily, he wasn't. All I could think of was that if he was willing to behave that way on a busy street in broad daylight, what would he act like if we were alone, or in a more secluded area, or on his boat? I immediately deleted him and reported him to the app. Wow, I mean, I am all for finding your happiness and taking matters into your own hands, but there really is a downside to these dating apps because, there's no way to check what people are on there. Do you see what I mean? There's no way to check their background, and you never know whether it's going to be a creeper or not, because guaranteed 100,000% there are creepers on there. I've also heard stories from my friends who've had proper horror dates with Tinder people they've met on Tinder, and it's just wild. I found it really funny that the OP kept counting the red flags, but yet carried on with the date. And once again, this is not her fault per se. It is just this mentality that so many of us seem to have, including myself, where we are so scared of being rude. But once again, I'm sorry I've said it so many times, but you don't owe this person anything. If you're on a date with a guy and for any reason, or with a girl, and for any reason whatsoever it doesn't feel right and you're uncomfortable, get out of there. It's not worth it. And then the fact that he was so rude and quite frankly just racist with the waiting staff, that is just so worrying. And I am so glad that this woman got away safely and that nothing more serious happened, because honestly, he invited her to his boat. What kind of a psycho? His boat? Really? Nothing, I can guarantee you now, nothing good would have happened on that boat. And probably nothing good has ever happened on that boat. So, that's a very, very smart decision not to go to his boat with him. Wow. Friend of mine has told me a story about the date she went on with a guy from Tinder recently, and he took her like in the middle of nowhere in the woods. That would freak me out so much. It didn't work out because, quite frankly, he was also very much a creeper. I'm not going to share too many details, but the things he said and did were alarming, to say the least. Alarming. But yeah, you live and you learn. Sadly, that was it for tonight's scary stories. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope I will see you in the next one. As always, a huge thank you for the lovely Redditors who let me share their stories on the channel, and a huge, huge thank you to you for joining me again tonight. For now though, all there is left for me to do is to wish you